I'm going to present today on excellence in HREC services. I do feel to an extent like it's two sides of the coin, and we might indeed have some discussion at some point about, where the boundary between the two is. But I was going to spend the time this afternoon sharing some thoughts from Bellberry in terms of how to build in excellence into HREC services. Hopefully these presentations are going to segue quite nicely, actually. I really appreciated Charlotte's presentation, and thank you for sharing all of that information. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time today actually on the kind of systems approach to building in excellence. So I think the two presentations go quite well together. Hopefully you can see my slide deck. Gordon, perhaps give me a thumbs up if that's...
Yes, we can, Kylie, all good.
Perfect. So to start off with, I am just going to spend a couple of minutes introducing Bellberry, because there may well be people and organisations online that haven't come across Bellberry. Bellberry is a not-for-profit organisation based here in Australia. We have two fairly straightforward not-for-profit objectives. The first is to protect the welfare of human research participants, and the second kind of broader objective is to improve the quality, efficiency and effectiveness of research. Now, again, I'm not going to go into everything that's on this slide, but I am conscious that again, there may be people on the session today that are not fully aware of all of the aspects of Bellberry. And Bellberry was established nearly 20 years ago now as the first private, independent, not-for-profit provider of HREC services in Australia. And I might just mention, when I use the word independent, we use that very deliberately. And in the use of the word independent, we mean consciously three different things. We're geographically independent, we're financially independent, and we're institutionally independent. Now, initially, we were set up really to provide support, research office support, to clinical trials in private hospital settings. But each year that we've been in operation, we have grown, and we do now support research across the private, public, academic and government sectors in Australia. And our user base is truly nationwide. Again, I'm not going to go through every milestone that's on this slide, but I'm just going to call out a couple. We were certified for single ethical review back in 2008, and we have been fully accredited by the International Research Ethics Organisation, AHREC, since 2020. In fact, we're the only provider in Australia to have that international accreditation. Of course, as I mentioned, we are a not-for-profit organisation, and so we put the proceeds from our service into projects, grant funds and initiatives that support those dual objectives that I mentioned at the outset. And again, you'll see a couple of logos on this slide that are spin-out organisations from Bellberry, and Praxis and CTIQ are the two that I would mention in particular. So Bellberry is, as I mentioned, an institutionally independent HREC providing national services. We're headquartered in South Australia, but only 8% of our workload is here in South Australia. We are truly nationwide, supporting more than 7,000 users at more than 1,000 sites across the country. We host 12 HRECs with more than 130 expert members. And on an annual basis, we will provide oversight for more than a third of Australia's CTN registered TGA trials. But in terms of, I suppose, the core content of what I'm going to share with you today, Gordon and I had spoken about this question of competence and capability. In Bellberry terms, we talk about HREC excellence. And so I'm going to share with you over the next 4 topic areas the key features that we think about in Bellberry when we think about how to build in excellence to HREC reviews. Now, again, I'm being very deliberate with my wording, and I want to share some of the reasoning that we have behind that wording. I think there is often now, and it's really good, there's often a focus on the timeliness of our reviews. But to echo some of what Charlotte said, when we talk about excellence, we mean two things. We mean quality of review and timeliness of review. And the other thing I want to mention is that, of course, we're mindful that the HREC is not just about that initial review and decision making. It's really important that we remember that the remit of the HREC also covers ongoing oversight and all of the obligations that fall into that. And so over the next few slides, I'm going to share with you some thoughts on these four factors: HREC community, quality systems, excellence in process, and consistency. And hopefully, as I say, this will be very complementary to Charlotte's presentation. In terms of HREC community, the first thing I would mention in the Bellberry team, very similar to the HRA method, we have a dedicated member team that are responsible for recruiting, supporting, developing and managing our member team. I've already mentioned we have 12 HRECs, we have 10 HRECs, HREC chairs plus deputies. We have more than 130 HREC members across a range of different skill sets and categories. Bellberry members are essentially volunteers. They're not employed by Bellberry, they join us in a voluntary extracurricular capacity. We do remunerate our members, and I'm sure that may well be something that we come to talk about. But for Bellberry, we remunerate our volunteers to recognise a professional service, and it allows us to hold our members accountable for those two factors, quality and timeliness of review. We're very clear with our members that we don't pay for decision making, we pay for review processes. Our member team undertakes analysis on our research portfolio and indeed undertakes horizon scanning to understand future needs. So future trends in technology, future trends in therapeutic innovation, and we ensure that we're recruiting members according to what those future trends and current research portfolio needs are. We recruit to provide resilience. So we look to make sure that we have multiple members within every category and within every skill set that we're likely to need to provide appropriate review to the research portfolio. We find that actually really helps with the recruitment of members because, I mean, we all know the kind of people that we're dealing with that at our HREC tables. They are clever, smart, they're pulled in 3 different directions. They are motivated and interested in doing the work of the HREC. Culturally, these people are not inclined to say yes to something that they're likely to let you down on. And so for us, we try to make sure that our members always feel able to say that I can't make that meeting. And we take the responsibility on Bellberry to make sure that we've always got backups. We provide induction and initial training and then provide ongoing professional development. And that professional development and training, that might be internal training activities, but it also includes both financial support for external training activities, and indeed Bellberry provides long-term support for critical professional societies. And a couple of really good examples of that are ASCEPT and APSA, the Australian Clinical Pharmacology and Toxicology societies. What this looks like on the ground, and this is very similar to a slide that Charlotte shared, is that we actually analyse our research portfolio to look at what are the skill sets, what are the scientific and clinical skill sets that we need to have around the table. And then you can see in the pie charts on the right-hand side, actually our makeup of members and how they fit across those categories. And I will just mention actually, as an aside, Bellberry produces an annual report, an annual activity report that provides more information about the clinical trial portfolio that we've seen within our committees over each year. And you'll find those numbers in that annual report. It's publicly available on our website at bellberry.com.au if anybody would like a copy. The third factor I'm going to mention is then quality systems. And of course, we all know about having a quality management system in place, but I want to talk really specifically about the various different elements of that quality system. So in the quality management system itself, we consider three elements. QA, so how we build in quality to our process. It's the recipe book, it's how we ensure repeatability and how we ensure that quality of review and final decision. We talk about quality control. So again, as Charlotte mentioned, we talk about checking in on how we did in our processes. So that is both in terms of internal process reviews, but also in terms of external reviews of the research that is conducted using a Bellberry approval. We talk about policies, practice, and providing best practice guidance. And again, we talk about that in terms of internal and external. So internal for our own use and for the use of our members, and external in terms of being out there supporting our researchers. We provide performance monitoring. Now, this I think is slightly different for Bellberry than it is for lots of other HRECs around the country. If you're an HREC that's embedded within an institution, then you likely can rely on other governance or research integrity processes within your institution. But for Bellberry as an institutionally independent committee, from the outset, we always had a view that we needed to get out on the road. We needed to visit our research sites. We needed to actually touch base with research studies that have been approved by Bellberry to ensure that the research being conducted is being conducted according to the approvals that we have in place. And that really, of course, is in addition to our regulatory obligations as far as ongoing oversight and requirements are in place. In terms of performance monitoring and support, I will just mention that as well. Bellberry, I mentioned at the outset, Bellberry reviews approximately a third of Australia's CTN registered trials, and we provide a turnaround time from submission to final decision of 20 days. It's really interesting looking at turnaround times because we can actually also identify the benefits of standardization and streamlining. Best example of that is that we can actually look at a number of specialist sites that are long-time users and have proactively engaged with us in terms of standardization of core components of clinical trial activity. And in those cases, we can actually see that average turnaround time come down from 20 business days, actually down to 16, even 14 days. So we really do see case studies where standardization can really help in terms of that turnaround time. Of course, it also helps in terms of the quality and consistency because you build in that repeatability to the process. Final couple of areas I want to talk about. The first is supporting excellence in the process. Bellberry takes pride as a specialist provider in providing a best-in-class service to our research users that supports that protection of human research participants. We undertake also a user review, and in our last research user review, 90% of our research users categorized the Bellberry service as being excellent, very good, or good. And the key words that they used were words like professional, patient, thorough, helpful, prompt, and relevant, all of which were really music to our ears. So how do we support excellence in process? Well, at the outset, I want to say that, as I've said at the start, we think about both the review process and the initial phase to get to a decision, but we're also very conscious about oversight and that involvement between the HREC and the research team throughout the conduct of the study through to closure. Internally, we've put a lot of effort into providing decision support tools. Some of those are technology-based, some of those are skills-based. And so similar to what Charlotte described at the HRA, we provide not only a professional secretariat to each of the HREC meetings, but we also provide an executive Bellberry support person into each of the meetings. And that person has carriage of things like providing policy insight, providing precedent insight. So providing a history, for example, of where we might have seen that molecule before, or indeed when we might have seen a study structure like that before. In addition, we've developed internally technology tools that provide additional decision support. And all of our systems, I should say, are electronic. So we've been based on the electronic system called eProtocol for about 15 years now. So a lot of these technology tools have been developed to hang off the database that we have in place and have had for a long time. Our aim in terms of internal support processes to make sure that our members can focus purely on the HREC decision making. So whatever we can do to lighten the load of our HREC members, we will do, whether that's from providing the recruitment and making sure that we've got sufficient members around the table, through to handling agendas and minutes and facilitating discussions with researchers. In addition, though, of course, our professional secretariat also provides support for researchers, support for the application processes, and support for participants. Again, we're geographically and institutionally independent. So for us, a lot of that support actually is done over the phone. And we've got a large team here that are at the end of a phone. Of course, remember, for many of you, that if you're based in an institutional HREC, that would be very normal for you. For our core, certainly initial user base, if you're sitting in the private sector, you don't necessarily have a local institutional research office that you can pick up the phone to. And we really aim to provide that support to our researchers in its place. Other dimensions where we provide support centrally includes things like providing resource, both in terms of time and in terms of funding, to access external experts where required, and to provide other access to centralised support. So things like regulatory science, legal, media support, and so on. And then finally, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about how we support consistency in our processes. And I mean, Charlotte has mentioned some of these points already, I think. Bellberry, as I outlined to you, has grown every year that we've been in operation. Nearly 20 years ago, we started with committee number 1. We now have 12 committees. As we've grown in scale, we've had to put more time and more thought into the consistency of our processes and the consistency of our decision-making. I know later on Gordon wants to talk a little about consistency of processes, and I know that researchers have questions about the consistency of decision-making between different HRECs. Imagine now that you're Bellberry, where you have 12 committees under your own roof. The question is, how do you ensure consistency between those committees? And for us, the most important mechanism that we have in place is that we have developed a policy forum. That policy forum is a place where all of the chairs and deputy chairs come together, and they actually also come together with the executive. So Bellberry also has a voice at that forum with a range of executives, including quality, operations, and so on. And we hold that meeting quarterly. We hold it as a formal process. And our agenda actually can be quite diverse. It includes policy and regulation. So that includes kind of both directions of policy and regulation, if you like. It ensures that we have a mechanism for reviewing changes that are cascading from regulation and requiring inclusion into policy and practice. And I'm sure other HRECs might feel the same. You know, in the last couple of years, we've seen really a very high level of consultation from our government and regulatory partners into new processes, new policies, new approaches. And so for us, the Policy Forum is our formal mechanism for responding to those changes that we see in regulation. Similarly, of course, though, we look to consider changes in the other direction. So with the scale of the research portfolio that we see, we actively consider whether there are any points and what those points might be on which we should advocate. So we look within our research portfolio, for example, for trends that we think need addressing in changes to the regulation. And some good examples we've seen in recent history, of course, is things like stem cells and regenerative medicines, the new consultation that we've seen on combination and boundary products, we're really pleased to see. And of course, the other very important case in point was COVID considerations. And for us, the Policy Forum was absolutely key to, very quickly developing and disseminating a Bellberry position on a number of different aspects that sought to ensure participant safety, manage patient safety, while continuing the safe continuation of trials wherever possible. The Policy Forum also provides us essentially with an escalation pathway for reviews. Now, escalation might happen for a couple of reasons. So, for example, there might be a significant disagreement either within an HREC or between HRECs. There might be a disagreement between the HREC and the primary investigator, or there might simply be a contentious or a precedent position that we actually want to take to our panel of chairs to reach a precedent position on. But then the final thing I want to mention about this Policy Forum and the strength I believe it gives us is that we spend a lot of time thinking about collegial consistency. So we spent a lot of time sharing case studies from between the committees, so that the chairs collectively come to essentially a consensus position. And while every study, of course, is different, they're like children, every single one is different. Reaching as many consensus positions and having a deep understanding of where the differences lie, we think is really important in terms of developing overall consistency in process. And for us, we think that's important for Bellberry users. We have a view that it should be invisible to Bellberry users which of the 12 committees their HREC application goes to. And that's one of the important mechanisms that helps us to deliver on that. And finally, on that list, support for participant complaints. Again, it gives us an escalation point if there's a significant issue that needs further support. And with that, I have hopefully given you a whistle-stop tour of those 4 elements that we think about when we think about building excellence in HREC systems. And I'm very happy to take questions or indeed to join the panel, and we might take questions there.
Thank you, Kylie. Just it just provided a wonderful overview of Bellberry, and not quite as contentious as I thought it was going to be. So, Kylie, so really fascinating. Quick question. I mean, do you have all your bases covered to review all research? And if you don't, what do you do about it?
So that is a really good question, Gordon. And this is a bit of an insight into how that initial title came about, I think. I'm an engineer originally, a pharmaceutical engineer, but an engineer that nevertheless. And a core part of our engineering training was an understanding that part of competence is understanding where the boundary of incompetence lies. You know, you want your structural engineer to know the point at which they're beyond their physical capabilities. And I think it's actually a principle that can apply to anything. You know, we would want our surgeons likewise to know the point at which they're operating in the grey. I don't think it should be any different for HRECs, and in some cases I think it's actually easier for HRECs to determine where the boundary of their competence lies, because it's directly related to the skill sets available to them around the table. For Bellberry, I'm very confident to say to you, we don't have all of our bases covered. So we're very happy to actually identify when we will not conduct a review because it's not covered by our skill sets.
Yeah.
The main example of that is pediatric research. We don't have pediatric experts on our members, on our member list, and therefore we don't review pediatric research.
And Kylie, I see Kathy Stevens was giving the boss a little hint there to say external experts. Thanks, Kathy, but I think Kylie had it covered, to be perfectly honest. Right. Funny stuff. You know, Kylie,